Hello, everybody. How are you doing? This is going to be a fun one. This is going to be a fun one. I think all of us are going to be able to come together in harmony over some of the ridiculousness in this video I'm about to show you. It is a 30-minute video. So we're going to buckle in. I hope everyone has their snacks. Maybe you have some matcha tea with you, which I do, or perhaps you have brought your mason jar of water, both of which will be important because the amount of talking or screaming you will be doing at your computer or mobile device will be necessitating hydration. And that is because we are going to watch Susan Wojcicki, CEO of YouTube, discuss what I really still can't quite figure out if it's the hubris behind it or just ignorance or there's a tactic and strategy behind this. I'm not quite sure why she's so open sometimes with some of the things she says. There are a few slip-ups, which I think are a tad Freudian in nature, that we will also discuss. But this is a video for the Global Technology Governance Summit, recently posted to the World Economic Forum's YouTube channel. It is kind of hilarious. I'll show you real fast before we start watching. Actually, I'm going to choose this screen because I think I like it. You can see it. Okay, it's a little bit bigger. It's pretty funny because check out the likes to dislikes. 10 likes to 332 dislikes. And I've heard from people, I'll have to go back and find it maybe after we watch this, the video that I posted about Susan receiving that honorary free expression award that YouTube sponsored. And I've heard there's like thousands of dislikes to like a few likes. So it's kind of funny because one of the comments here, it's hilarious. They think this channel is good for PR whatsoever. Mommy Susan deletes 8,000 dislikes per video on the White House channel to protect the most popular president ever. Anyway, Mother Susie just wants us safe, guys. Just sleep and trust the government and the billionaires. So there's some good comments on this. The link is in the description if you want to go back and watch it yourself at a later date. But I will let you know right now we are going to watch it in its entirety. Might short the little bit at the end that's not discussing our topic at hand, but we're going to watch a significant portion of this. So just letting everybody kind of get in and make sure we're all comfortable and ready to go. We do have some folks already in the chat. Thank you, Isaac, for the super chat. Thank you for the compliment on my glasses. Probably don't ask people their thoughts on my glasses because you're probably going to get a lot of negative comments because my glasses, it turns out, are very divisive. But you know what? I don't care because I worked hard enough to deal with wearing what I had to wear when I was in TV. So now I'm going to wear what I want. Though I will say back when I was in television news, I still basically wore what I wanted because I just didn't care about what my bosses thought in that regard. Bob says YouTube has suffered massive revenue hits as a result of some of these changes, and yet they continue to march forward with them. Yeah, you got to ask why, what's going on here. I don't think, and you said earlier, hopefully she admits she lost a ton of money changing the algorithm. I don't think I remember her saying anything about losing money. All right. So remember, if it's a knife fight, if only one person has a knife, not a stabbing. I don't know what that's talking about. Is that talking about what happened a few days ago in Columbus or this video? Is Susan knifing somebody? I'm not sure. I think probably people could make an argument that you're talking about Susan, but I don't know. Alison gives very few Fs, but those Fs she gives are the Fs we need. What does F stand for? Is that a bad word? I'm guessing. Okay. So shall we start watching the video? We have about 150 people watching, so we'll start with that. I'll take it. And here we go. So she is discussing this with Nicholas Thompson, who is the chief executive officer of The Atlantic. And The Atlantic, I've done a video or so on, kind of on board with the speech suppression movement. So it's basically like one massive corporation that likes speech suppression interviewing another huge corporation that is involved in speech suppression. And it's really interesting to hear Susan talk about, she has this sort of brief blurb where she discusses the call from the media for speech suppression, which we all knew was happening, but she actually just openly admits it here. So like I said, do these people just live in a complete echo chamber and they don't realize there's all these people? They can't possibly be missing the fact that there's a significant amount of dislikes versus likes on these videos. They obviously know this is happening. If they're even discussing the idea of getting rid of the dislikes, all of a sudden now they're going to get rid of the dislikes. All right, enough of my rant for right now. Let's begin, shall we? So here's Susan Wojcicki. This is the opening. And let me know if you can't hear it. Please let me know if you can hear it or if you can't hear it in the chat, because I'm using my new StreamYard technology today. So I just want to make sure that you guys can hear it okay. All right, here we go.
So let's jump in. I just want to ask you a little bit about YouTube in the past year, because we've all been locked at home, basically watching YouTube, right? We started watching videos on how to make hand sanitizer and then videos of how to do arts and crafts. We didn't go crazy. Tell me the most surprising thing that you've learned about how people watched YouTube during the pandemic.
Well, first of all, I'll just say I never thought that we would have so many hand washing videos. It was featured on the Google homepage, and that's something I really could never have predicted. But I mean, I just saw, and I felt it was a huge responsibility for us with the pandemic to be able to be, I felt like we were such an important link for people to all kinds of information.
Okay. This is where she says the funniest thing. They were the link to people for all kinds of information, which is hilarious because somebody else caught up on that. And they say here, YouTube is in no way linked to all kinds of information. This comment here, it's like right at the top with 59 likes. So I thought that was interesting because we all know that during, especially like the beginning, but even, probably worse now, that YouTube was kicking people off with different ideas left and right. And, just very basic things like questioning ventilators at the beginning. So let's tone it down a little bit, Suze, on that.
Whether people were at home, they needed to connect to whether it was their religious organizations or social groups or, we saw musicians who came out and did big concerts. We saw bands come and post historic coverage of concerts. It was just so important way for people to connect and learn. And, one of the things probably that surprised me the most, which was really your question there, Nick, was how important we became in distributing COVID-19 information. And we immediately saw the role that we played, and we just we had everyone working at full capacity. So,
okay, she immediately saw the role they were playing. What is that role, you ask? What was the role of YouTube at the beginning or even now with COVID-19?
We served hundreds of billions of impressions of COVID information related to, ways to that came from different health organizations. And we also made sure that we had playlists. We had to implement a whole bunch of new policies, but we really saw the critical role that we played in health. And that was the first time, and working with health organizations. We worked with over 85 different health organizations. And it was really the first time that we worked so closely in the health field.
Okay. I'm stopping here because two things. So she makes it very clear that it was health organizations. She says it 3 or 4 times. Health organizations, World Health Organization, American Medical Association, stuff like that, right? So a lot of these government-based. And she says this is the first time that they've had such a significant role in public health. The reason that I stop here and bring this up is because I got a little bit of pushback when I was doing my video about Whitney Webb getting booted from Patreon, suspended from Patreon for misinformation, medical misinformation. But really, that's not even what they said, actually. The reason that they gave her was she wrote an article on her own website that they said was going to dissuade people from taking preventative measures for COVID-19. And there's all kinds of argument pushback that you could give Patreon, which I'm not going to get into right now. You can go check out that video if you want. And you can also go check out Whitney Webb on Twitter. She talks all about it. And on her own website. But I made the argument that it was an escalation. And a lot of people are like, this is not an escalation. Patreon's been booting people off for what they do on their own websites for a long time. This is nothing new. And I was like, no, this is new in this particular case, because this is an active agenda with government propaganda to elicit public health response, okay? To elicit a behavior from the populace that the government wants you to engage in for their own agenda. Now, maybe you argue that the government has your best interest at heart. I would disagree with you, but let's just even leave it at that. Say you think that propaganda is good. I have some journalist friends who say there's no propaganda. I'm thinking, well, you might say that it's good for you. I don't really quite think you can argue there isn't propaganda out there. If in fact we define propaganda as intentional information that is being distributed to elicit a particular behavior, I would say it's pretty clear that's happening right now. Whether you want to say that the government has your best interest at heart and they're doing this on purpose, that's up to you. But I think you and I would disagree. This is just to say that that's why I believe this is an escalation. COVID was an escalation of these policies and these agendas, specifically because it wasn't just, going off on hate speech or whatever else. Here it is. We're actually trying to get people to do things with their own health based on information that these big tech corporations are allowing you to see and not allowing you to see in order to get you to act a certain way with your own medical history. And I think that, to me, that's different, but I got a lot of pushback on that. But she basically admits that working with health organizations and the government, basically, in order to get you on board with what you want done. Okay. Bob says, work so closely with health orgs. This proceeds directly from Event 201. Yes. And you know what's interesting is that I'm getting into this whole world of the Great Reset and whatnot. And I'm going to show you some stuff after we watch this. But I think, again, I would like to know in the comment section, just curious what you all think about, because it's easy to just watch this and say, why are they telling us this? Why are they just admitting this? But maybe there's a strategy behind it. So what do you think the strategy is? Why be so open about some of this stuff? They just don't realize, or there's a reason. Let's keep watching.
With so many different organizations for something that was global in nature.
It's very interesting. And in fact, it leads right into the news from today. So as some people who are watching may know, YouTube made an announcement maybe 3 or 4 hours ago about violative content, basically measuring the amount of content that violates YouTube's standards. And one of the standards you can violate is misinformation about COVID-19. So the question I want to ask about that is, this new report is out. There's transparency. That's wonderful. The amount of content that people view that violates your policy is quite low. It's 17 views out of 10,000. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. It's approximately somewhere between 16 to 18 for 10,000 views.
So that means with my children, that means we probably see 16 to 18 a day. But the question I want to ask is, of the different contents category that you are screening for, where you have policies that could be violated, hate speech, nudity, terrorism, what remains the hardest category to identify? They're all difficult in different ways. You've used machine learning to knock the numbers down. What is the one that machine learning still has the hardest time with?
Okay, before we get to her answer there, I was just adding a link to a WAPost article regarding what he was discussing. So YouTube came out with, I'm not going to show it to you right now just because it's going to pain to share the screen with StreamYard, but they came out with this new report a couple weeks ago saying that it's getting better at spotting and removing videos that break its rules against disinformation. And so that they're discussing basically that they're celebrating that they've come out with the exact numbers they believe to be how many things you view that's disinformation compared to the truth. Okay. They've basically given a number now. They think that this is the amount of times, if you watch 10,000, I believe that's what you said, 10,000 views, 16 times you're going to see something that they would consider false information. I believe that's what you just said, but I will admit that I was pasting a link in my description of the video. So if you want to go look at that, you can. So maybe I got that wrong, but I believe that's what you said. Anyway, basic point is that she's discussing that they're actively doing this and they want to give the information to whoever is interested, that they have now numerated, they have figured exactly what they believe to be the amount of views that you have on their channel and how much of that is false, that they consider false. Okay. And we're going to get into all of this. You'll see how she starts defining all this stuff in a second, but here we go. So this is the hardest thing to spot.
Well, first of all, I just want to say, I think it was a really important milestone in terms of what we announced today, because we have been asked many, many times by governments, by press, by advertising, creator community.
Okay. She just says, this is a really big milestone because we've been asked by the government, the press, advertising, corporations. So she basically just says, this is something we talk about, that corporate journalists my former peers are in some cases leading the charge for speech suppression, which is a great travesty, in my opinion, for journalism in today's world. But whatever, she just openly admits that. Like, we're getting pressured by the press, and so we're giving our numbers now, and we're getting better at locking down anything that's not in corporate press, which she will eventually say, basically,
about this violative rate. And we were able to show exactly how good we are at enforcement of our policies, right? So we were able to show that we have a very high ability to find this content and show exactly what that number was. We were also able to show that we were able to reduce it significantly over time. So if you look at where we were in 2017 at the same time of the year, we've reduced this more than 70%. And that is...
Okay, she says they've suppressed speech by 70%. That's basically what she's saying since 2017.
So you do an incredible amount of hard work with machines and also improving our policies. So not only did we significantly remove content that violates our policies at that significant rate, but we also created a lot more policies that we had to remove. And I would say the machines are good. We can find content across the board. But something like hate speech or something that has a lot of context would be something that would be harder from a machine standpoint to be able to detect. But in the end, we've been able to really fine tune our machines so that we can find a lot of this content. And it is flagged, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's removed. So what happens is the machines will flag it, and then it will be sent to human reviewers who will determine whether or not this is in fact violative or not.
Okay, an interesting point here, I've seen this happen behind the scenes on my own channel, is she's saying that the machine will detect something about your video that flags it for a human reviewer. And I have noticed that topics very similar in nature, very similar in presentation, will get a different response depending on the manual review. So it's not even really an accurate science in that regard, because depending on who's reviewing your video, they may be somebody who's a little bit more risk averse, or somebody who's like, you're gone, shut it down. And sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you don't. Let's see. I'll go into a couple, okay. A couple of comments here. How is this person the CEO of anything? Very unimpressive. Social media won't let us talk about it, and the government just keeps pushing with the help of mainstream media. She is advocating. YouTube is dead, but just doesn't know it yet. I don't know. I think YouTube, this is interesting. I think YouTube in the future or tomorrow is going to just continue becoming an arm for corporate media or just big corporations in general. Susan, in the video that I did about her winning that award or receiving that free expression award that she bought for herself, basically says we see ourselves as the next generation of a platform for media companies to share their content. She says that. Media companies. It's a very, I think, interesting that she didn't say people. Individuals, YouTubers, single person in the basement or in their farmhouse studio like I am, being able to upload. She sees it as the next platform's generation for how media companies are going to spread the word. So she was pretty clear about that in that video. Public relations and marketing was a key part of Event 201. They made it very clear they were going to do whatever was needed to spread a consistent message from the top down, i.e. propaganda plus censorship. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're just so open about it. I don't understand. I don't know. Can somebody come up with a reason why? Why are they so open about it? It seems like a terrible idea to just let everybody know that you're trying to control them. But anyway, let's continue watching.
And the catch is, or one of the complexities here is that this is content that violates your policies. It's not content that violates my policies or that fits some government's definition of hate speech. So a critique that someone could make is, this is just what you think is bad content. It has nothing to do with what I think is bad content. How do you
That's a critique someone can make. That's a critique that someone can make. That is just you just making the decision, right? It's just like, I don't know, the main critique. Anyway, let's see what she says.
Respond to that.
I'd say there are two different conversations. So the first one is for you and I and governments and everyone else. Everyone seems to have an opinion about this, about what is the good content, what's the bad content, what should be up, what should be down. So we engage with many different groups across many different topics. And I'd say that's one conversation. But then we post very clearly and we say, this is the content that we have decided is violative of our platform. We post it on our community guidelines. And then that's a different question, which is, well, how good a job do you do at removing that content once you've identified it? And
it's pretty obvious when she talks about these two parts, like all the groups she's talking to, about how you identify it and then what do you do and how good are you at getting rid of it, that you can tell what group she's talking to. Because if she's talking to people like me, that would not be, I would be in some third part, because I would not be asking her to identify this stuff nor squash it. That would not be a discussion. There would be another point like, well, how do you make sure there isn't really important information that's being removed that people should hear about? How do you know you're not just spreading government propaganda? How do you know you're not spreading corporate news propaganda? How do you know, like, these would be all these other points. So it's just obvious, like when she talks about the two parts of everybody has an opinion, but then basically the two parts are, how do you identify this information? And then how do you get rid of it? That, like, if you're only talking to one, you know, sort of that side of things that is very interested in speech suppression, because again, talking to somebody like me, there would be a million other parts to that response that would have nothing to do with asking her to comb through and boot people off.
And so, you know, this report that just came out showed exactly where we are, you know, which is a 99.85%, depending. We have a little confidence interval, which is why we have this 16 to 18 range in 10,000 views. So it's our goal is to break that into two different conversations.
Let me just stop to add, remember when I interviewed Ford Fisher on my channel and we discussed how he, as an independent journalist, is just literally uploading raw video, and his video from the January 6th event at the Capitol, the riot at the Capitol, he was told, basically it was taken down, and he was told that in order to be able to put this stuff up again, he needed to start contextualizing it and adding other sides to it. And so YouTube obviously is telling people to editorialize their content for whatever their particular ideology is, because you can't just, like, it's just not true. What she's saying is not true about they're identifying very clearly misinformation and getting rid of it, and they're just 99.7% accurate at that. When you have a guy like Ford Fisher who literally is just uploading straight video and not even trying to water it down for you or show you you know, his point of view, he's just literally just uploading the video, and they're like, nope, you can't just upload raw video. Now you have to contextualize it. What is contextualizing? That's editorializing. So it's just like, that is how is Ford Fisher's video misinformation? Like, you know, it's literally raw video, but it's just video they didn't want to see. Video they don't want to see, I guess. I'm not really quite sure. Video they didn't want out there. You just can't. I guess if they would just call it that, like they would just say, this is a video we don't want people to see. Then, you know what? I think I would be, I mean, it would still be a pain in the butt, but I think I would still at least, I would feel like they were being a little bit more genuine about what they're doing. Just say, this is video that we don't want you to see. It's true, but we just don't want you to see it. Then I would be like, okay, you know, fine, fair. Okay. I'm annoyed by that, but you know, at least you're being honest.
Conversations. First, what the policies should be, and then do we do a good job enforcing them once we have those policies?
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Let's shift to the question of good content, right? So sometimes there's all kinds of interesting content that you regulate in different ways, right? There's bad content, which you try to get rid of. There's borderline content, which is stuff that doesn't violate your policies. You try to downrank that. Mm-hmm. And then there's the content that we sort of want to see. And there's also this fourth category of content we're really happy we saw, right? So if I spend an hour on YouTube and I surf through YouTube and I follow the recommendation algorithm and I watch a lot of sport videos and maybe I see the late night comics, at the end of the hour, I feel, that was fine. If at the end of the hour, like I can solve a Rubik's Cube because the YouTube algorithm has pushed me in like super interesting directions and figured out that I've always wanted to solve a Rubik's Cube, then I'm thrilled. How do you think about incentivizing not just kind of run-of-the-mill sugar, not bad, but like the really good stuff? Like, what's the exact inverse of the violative content?
Look,
This is interesting. All right.
I think one of the things I've learned working in information since I've been at Google for over 20 years is the broad range of interests that people have. Information is incredibly diverse. And what a lot of people love about YouTube is they can say, I went and I found this specific video that I used to watch when I lived in this foreign country, far away, 40 years ago, and I found it on YouTube. Or I had to fix something that was very specific in my house and I could do that on YouTube. So first of all, it's really hard to say this is a content that is really great. I think you started talking about educational content. You implied with the Rubik's Cube that educational content had this higher premium. I'd say educational content is incredibly important to YouTube, and that almost everyone comes to YouTube to learn something. In fact, we just had this Ipsos study that said over 77% of people said they came to YouTube to learn something. And
that's a really important thing for people to hear. And one of the reasons that I continue to press on this topic is because Google and YouTube are two of the largest search engines in the entire world. And a lot of people believe that if they didn't see it on Google or YouTube, it doesn't exist. When in fact, that's not the way it works. I don't know if you all remember back when I did my video about what it was like covering Antifa in Seattle. It took about 5 days for it to get 1 million views. And then all of a sudden, if you Googled the exact title, you couldn't find it. It just never came up. Now it does, but it does come up with age restriction. I believe you have to somehow confirm your age. Maybe you have to send in a driver's license. That's what some people told me. All I know is when I pull it up, it just says this is an age restricted video. That was not the case for the first week it was alive, or even the first months it was alive, though it was for the several months after it went bonkers online. You had to do it. You had to like search it on DuckDuckGo and Bing if you wanted to find it. If you use Google, you could literally type in the exact title and you just scroll through one after another, and it didn't come up, which was crazy because at that point in time I had, I gained something ridiculous like 65,000 subscribers after that in a week, but it was definitely by far my most watched video. So for that just to not come up, and all my other videos that had 400 views, it was just very weird. So, and
just anecdotally, everyone tells me how they fix something in their house, but I think what you're bringing up is one of these challenges: is what is considered good content. We do classify, when it comes to information, authoritative content. So if you're looking for COVID information, we actually can say, look, the health organization, your local health authority, the CDC, or whatever country you're in, or the World Health Organization, those are organizations that we can trust, as opposed to some channel that just showed up that we don't have any kind of authoritative information about.
Okay, so yeah, we can trust the World Health Organization, but we just can't trust somebody who just, they just came up out of nowhere and we don't have any information about them. Real fast, thank you, David, for the super chat. And Mike says, I found it in a split second. I'd like you to send me that and tell me when exactly you looked for my Antifa video, because if it was anytime in recent months, I believe you, but I just don't believe you. If that happened, back in September or October, or maybe you work for Google. And so that's how you were able to find it. But I had the vast majority of people writing me said they could not find it. I could not find it. I tried 1 million times. So you must have some kind of search skills that I don't have. My wife got me a Yoga Kittens calendar as a joke. The pictures are pretty funny. That must have been for somebody else. Oh, that was for Milk. Okay. So those hated videos on YouTube are videos produced by YouTube. That's kind of funny. Sometimes that is true. Okie dokie. Let's keep watching.
So we definitely have a concept with information about authoritative sources, and we make sure that when people are looking for information that is sensitive, that we show those authoritative sources. But if you're in the entertainment area, or you're looking to how to fix something or how to learn something on an obscure topic, it's really hard to put some judgment about what is the best content that's out there.
Right. So on authoritative content, that makes sense because you can just label. And if something is labeled as authoritative, you can boost it. if
Well, not just label it. Like, I mean, we have a more sophisticated algorithm.
Okay, so this is starting to get into the really important stuff. We're talking about how they boost and label authoritative content. Okay, authoritative content, which would also be involved in books like this called Manufacturing Consent. I don't know if you've read it before. It's all about propaganda and corporate media, but don't worry, it's exactly the people that they are boosting as authoritative. So let's continue.
In terms of how we identify that, and we also are working on a global component, but we definitely do raise it, and we've done a lot of work in the last year to identify sensitive areas and make sure that we're raising authoritative sources on that information.
Okay, that makes sense. And by the way,
that makes no sense to me. It makes sense to him, but it makes no sense to me. But let's continue.
When Susan speaks about fixing things, I was listening to a podcast of hers this morning where she talked about watching a YouTube video to learn how to fix her 3D printer, I believe, which I thought was a wonderful anecdote. Anyway, I thought that was a delightful story about how one can use YouTube. The last time we spoke, last time we spoke in public, which was
okay. I love that little slip up. The last time we spoke in public, because we're talking to each other behind the scenes all the time, right? Did you hear that? Is that just me? Maybe not all the time, but it's just funny to me. Like, of course these people are talking. Of course these people are talking. South
by Southwest. You introduced a new concept very much related to this, which is that when conspiracy information is shown, you would show a panel with authoritative information, and you would lead people to Wikipedia. Tell me how this has evolved over the last 2 years.
And just stop real fast. The Atlantic would be considered authoritative information, right? That's why they're having this conversation. That's why he's not scared. He's not scared that these policies are going to boot the Atlantic off of YouTube or anywhere else, are going to hurt them. They're totally fine. They're in the safe space. That's why he gets to do the interview.
Sure. So yes, we met almost 2.5 years ago, 2018. And
oh my God, 3 years ago.
Yeah, 3 years ago. And I told you that we were going to do label content. And at the time, that was a new idea. I don't think we.
Sorry, I had to show this. Do they have the same decorator, or are they in the same room? That's pretty good. Okay, let's keep going.
Had actually rolled it out, or we were just in the process of rolling it out. And that became something that we now refer to as information panels. And those information panels have become incredibly important. I'd say they're a serious workhorse in making sure that people have the right information and that we can use to counter misinformation. So I'll give you a few examples. We certainly have used that on all the coronavirus information. So if you look at something COVID related, we'll link to all different kind of health information, health authorities, depending upon what country you're in. All kinds of common conspiracies, we'll link that. For election integrity, we use that. In COVID.
Okay, so to just, conspiracies, blank, whatever, doctor that's talking about ventilators that ends up being right is a conspiracy at the beginning, talking about treatments that have worked, that's considered, conspiracy, people are getting booted. And we know that the government's coming after doctors like Dr. Brownstein, for instance, told him he wasn't even allowed to talk about what he was doing to treat his patients, has had no deaths, treated hundreds of people. He's not allowed to discuss it on his own website. So, it's not shocking. It's the same tactics the government's taking, just like the big corporations. And
we serve hundreds of billions of impressions that were different information panels. So we've come a long way, Nick, since we first met. And I'm hopeful that
they've come a long way. I mean, do you hear this? This is why I don't understand, because yes, they have come a long way, but those of us here, I'm, watching the chat, obviously we seem to be like-minded people in a lot of cases. And yes, they've come a long way, but I'm not sure I'm smiling about it like they are. So it's just crazy to see these people celebrating this. It is mind-boggling to me.
Our VBR is also the start to something really important, which is more transparency and just an enhancement of our transparency report to understand how we think about violative views.
Well, I wish we'd been able to announce the transparency report on this.
I'll do better next time.
Oh, okay. So that was basically like, Suze, you didn't give us the exclusive on this. What were you thinking? She's like, we'll do better next time. See, it's just like, but why didn't you? We would have liked to announce that here because hello, we're buds and we want to be able to talk about it. Why didn't you give me the scoop? And she's like, okay, next time I will.
I'll work on that. Okay.
You work on it.
Thank you so much. It's very important to be able to bring these things live at the forum. So one of the things that to me is most interesting about the algorithm.
It's really important for the World Economic Forum to break this news because they have no agenda.
We wrote a long piece at Wired. My previous job was as the editor of Wired about the way the algorithm had evolved. And one of the things that's so interesting is that every time you make a change to solve one problem, there's some kind of an unintended consequence. There's something that you then have to catch up to. There's some way that behavior has changed. So there's some new thing that is incentivized. Tell me how you think about the evolution of the algorithm right now, where it is right now. What are the key things you're prioritizing and trying to fix? And what are the things you're worried about?
Mm-hmm. Sure. I think we've come a long way in our algorithm. Ultimately, we want to give information and suggest videos to our users that we think they're going to enjoy and want to see and related are to their interests. But there's a lot of caveats to that too. So first of all, as I mentioned, when we deal with information, we want to make sure that the sources that we're recommending are authoritative, news, medical, science, etc.
Okay, so she just flat out says, again, they're recommending authoritative sources. So again, reason for doing this video, it is because that I want to push back on the whole speech suppression agenda, because I want people like Susan to know that there are people like Alison out there who do not align with the vast majority of her peers in corporate news who want her to do this kind of stuff. I know she probably doesn't care what I think, but I'm going to just put my opinion on the record. But actually, I don't think she's going to do anything in response to what I'm saying. So really, the main reason I do these videos is because if there's one or two people out there who are thinking, this doesn't exist because I haven't seen it yet, I want them to be very aware that you're not seeing things, not because they don't exist, but because they're actively being taken away from your horizon. And so people need to understand that this kind of stuff is happening. I know it may seem dumb to the rest of us. There are people out there that still don't realize that that's going on, but that's the main reason I talk about this, because I do believe you can find a lot of this stuff if you work hard to look for it. But people need to first understand that they have to start doing their own legwork when it comes to finding this information. And so I just am going to keep putting this out there just to show you, like, this is an active agenda, an active campaign to keep ideas from spreading that they have determined do not fit into their agenda. And so if you want to find something, you better look for it yourself. Okay?
And we also have created a category of more borderline content, where sometimes we'll see people looking at content that is, or it'll be content that's lower quality and borderline. And so we want to be careful about not over recommending that. So that's a content that stays on the platform, but it's not something that we're going to recommend.
Okay. So again, they may not rip it off, but they're not going to recommend it.
And so our algorithms have definitely evolved in terms of handling all these different content types. I'd say the plus of that is that our users are able to see higher quality content. They're also able to, we're able to make sure that they're getting information from sources that are very reliable. But I would say the con of potentially some of these changes.
Okay, I think this is probably where I'm going to break in, where she's talking about authoritative and she's talking about authoritative and high quality, okay? And she's talking about basically that corporate news sites are part of that. I just want to go back to a video that we may all remember here, and let me just make sure that my audio is working so you guys hear it. I'm just going to pull this up. But so let's remember that this was what? A week or two ago. Okay, so this is that guy, Charlie Chester, that Project Veritas reporter took on a couple of dates. And so this is what he says he thinks about his outlet as an authoritative source.
You brought in like so many medical people to like all tell a story that like is all speculation. Like, he was like neurological damage.
Talking about Trump.
Losing some fit to whatever. We were creating a story there that we didn't know anything about. So I think it's probably
Okay. Now, I did do my Project Veritas commentary video about how this guy's a technical director. Okay. And so I think some of the reaction to it, like I just was watching a video where Joe Rogan was talking about, like, he was a big guy at CNN. No, he was a guy that pushed buttons in a control room. That said, I also said there was value to what he was saying, because he does he has his own thoughts on the ethos of what CNN is putting out there. So there's value in what he says, even if he's not, Jeff Zucker. And I did say I think the editorial meeting calls are more informative, but you literally have an employee of CNN saying that they knew nothing about what they were talking about. It was pure speculation, and he thinks it's propaganda. And granted, this guy had no qualms with that, really. I mean, frankly, he went back and said when he was talking about trying to get Trump out of office, he believed CNN was one of the main reasons that Trump was not elected. He says that he was at CNN for that reason. So these people, this is one of the things I try to help people understand on this channel, is that I think that there's, my opinion is that somehow in their minds, they have been able to hold in tension spreading propaganda and that being a good thing. Okay. So, I would say that actually is pretty accurate for a lot of the journalists that I know that are still in mainstream media, that they probably wouldn't like to call it propaganda, but they have no problem spreading it. They understand it's a narrative. They understand that what they're doing is fitting and shaping a particular reality. They understand all of that, but they still think somehow that's the truer, higher purpose of what they're doing. Anyway, I just think it's funny. I'm going to put together a montage. Give me some thoughts in the comment section if you think this would be a good for a little montage where I put Susan Wojcicki and Charlie Chester together in a little back and forth where she's like, authoritative sources, and he says, I think that's propaganda, and then I can make it a rap or something, like I can put it to a beat. And then we can all share it on our respective social media platforms until it gets booted. So Milkman Dan says, here's some money to get you started on your authoritative bookshelf. It's the YouTube version of A Doctor's White Coat. Books equals smart derpy derpy do. Okay. Thank you. Boogie. I don't know what that is for. Either they are fools or else they are so trapped in oxygen depleted bubble. Colin, if YouTube bans people under the guise of misinformation, shouldn't authoritative sources be banned as well for misinformation when they edit or distort videos for their agenda? It's a great point. I brought it up a couple times. It doesn't happen to them. That's why you have to really question whether that's actually at the root of what they're doing. It's in the open because we're in the end game. We are witnessing the turn-up phase of a global digital physical panopticon that will control all social, financial, political activity. AJ was right. Are you talking about Alex Jones? I'm guessing you probably are. Alison, you must be doing something right because the amount of trolls has increased. I don't know if I know who you're specifically talking about, maybe, but that our relationship goes back a long time. Not a long time, but several months, not new. But I will say I'm definitely getting my share of heat, which is fine. It's fine. I'm a big girl. I can handle it. All right. There's literally pornography on YouTube. Totalitarian sources are my favorite sources. Highest quality propaganda. Yeah, that's because it's like high. That's what she was saying. High quality, right? They wanted to have high quality. Okay. Oh, was the Charlie Chester was too low? Do we need to go back and watch it again? Do we need to go back and watch it? Here. Let's take it back. Let's take it back for a second. Let's see if I can make sure that I'm gonna make sure that you can hear it because it's good. It's worth it. Let's just double check and make sure. Oh yeah, that's why, because I didn't click the share audio. Let's watch it again. All right. You can't watch this enough. Here we go.
Whatever. We were creating a story there that we didn't know anything about. So that's I think that's propaganda. We had nothing else to run with at that time. We were like just taking shots off the bow, just hoping something would hit.
I guess I have a
okay. So there you go. They were just taking shots off the bow, hoping something would hit. I gotta say, I did make it very clear that I was okay. Sorry, I'm just going through some of the chats. I make it very clear that I think you got to take this guy with a grain of salt, simply because he wasn't necessarily a decision maker. Okay. So it's his opinion, but he's still in the ethos of the newsroom. He still can understand what he's seeing around him. So I don't totally throw out what he has to say altogether, whatever. I think people can recognize how things look on it. We can. We're not even there. It's pretty obvious to a lot of us, some of the garbage that ends up on CNN and a lot of the other mainstream news outlets. But I will take some of the stuff he says and just say, okay, does that match up with my experience in the newsrooms I was in? that's one thing that was, a chronic issue was, okay, this is a big headline and we're just going to run with it because people will watch it. So we'll just bring in a bunch of people we consider experts and then we'll just have them talk for hours on end. Now in local news, it's a little less common because local news isn't a 24-hour news job, but it can be lengthy. We had like 12 or 13 hours of live broadcasting, so a lot. So we're looking to fill time. So you could have panels like that, but definitely on the 24-hour outlets, that's what they're doing all the time. They just call this guy. I mean, I used to work in that, right? That was my first job in news, was at Fox News Channel. And we used to be like, this is a topic, just book an expert. And like, okay, I was literally 22 years old. Did I know who an expert, like a good expert would have been on whatever war we were in? No. Or like whatever terrorism policy, or like, no, I was 22. I didn't know what I was doing. And I would just call these guys, and I'm sure they were, all handpicked in the Rolodex as sort of safe sources. All right. So shall we go back to our video with Susan? I think we shall. So let me just make sure that I have the audio pulled up again here, and we will get back to the matter at hand.
Changes, because as you pointed out, every change has some downside. Is it may be harder in some cases for channels maybe who are getting started or smaller to be able to be visible when there is a major event or when people are looking at something that is science or news related. But I would say that that's a trade-off that we've made because we've realized that it's really, really important. So like we learned this lesson the hard way. So when we had the Las Vegas shooting, unfortunately, there were a lot of people who were uploading content that was not factual, that was not correct. And it's much easier to just make up content and post it from your basement than it is to actually go to the site and to be able to report and have high quality journalistic reporting.
Okay. There are very few, I will say, if we're just talking about the Vegas shooting specifically, there were probably a couple, and it was a big story, so maybe more than normal, on the ground organizations. But for any number of other national or international stories, there's a wire service or two, maybe a correspondent at one or another network, and they're fishing the information to everybody else around the country or around the world. And there's no secondary research about whether they got it right, whether they got it wrong. I was just on Ryan Christian's channel talking about this because he was asking, if you sign up for the wire services, you can get them direct yourself. And he was saying, in your newsrooms, if you got something from Reuters or from the AP or CNN, for instance, would have stuff that would come down the pipeline, would you guys ever confirm or deny what they were saying? Would you ever actually do your own primary research to make sure that this wasn't just propaganda, or a mistake or bias or whatever? And like, no, we never did that. We never did that. It was just copy and pasted and put in the prompter. So it's just interesting that she says that, like, yeah, you can be in your basement, or you could be a corporate news journalist who's actually there. It's like, actually that's not, maybe in a case like the Vegas shooting where there's a lot of attention on it for a few days, that's the case. But in most national or international reporting, there's just not, it is reporters, maybe not in a basement, but actually nowadays, maybe because of COVID, a lot of them aren't even going to the newsrooms. They are sitting in their basements and doing that. So it just a qualifier there.
And so that was just an example of what happens if you don't have that kind of ranking. So sure, we want to enable citizen journalism and other people to be able to report and other people to be able to share information in new channels. But when we're dealing with a sensitive topic, we have to have that information coming from authoritative sources so that the right and accurate information is viewed by our users first.
And that's not an easy trade-off. I mean, your name is YouTube. The whole principle is that anyone can have complete free speech and publish whatever they want. Or that was the founding principle.
I think Bob Wildfish has brought this up a couple times in the chat and on my other platforms, which again, just as a quick reminder, it is Anti-Authoritarianism April still, and my uploads are demonetized for this month. So if you want to go to my other platforms or support my work, there are links in the description for that. But this is a question that has been brought up, which is, yes, exactly part of the point. It's like you grew based on this freedom that people had to connect with each other, upload videos. And back in the day, yeah, I mean, that it was really a historic thing. And still here I am talking to you guys wherever you are in the world. That's awesome. But okay, so is it fair that you use that to get to where you are, and now you've built this company, now you're basically only working with other massive corporations, which is a complete trade-off, or I would guess reversal of how you got to where you are. This is the thing that bugs me about people like Phil DeFranco, who's been one of the, he's been one of the people that has talked openly about YouTube not doing a good enough job about getting misinformation off of the platform, specifically like that after January 6th. And recently I saw a video from Phil complaining that his videos were getting suppressed. And I'm like, dude, what are you saying right now? I'm having a very hard time understanding what is coming out of your mouth. I'm seeing your lips moving, but I'm not understanding it, because you literally were the person who is telling Susan that she should be blocking more videos. And now you're complaining that she's blocking yours. I don't understand how people don't see how eventually the arrows come back at them. That it's just hello. But anyway, let's continue on.
Imagine that this is a trade-off that did not come lightly. So it's
it is. I lost you on the last second there, broke up a little bit, but you're right. Like, we came from YouTube, and YouTube, when YouTube first started, it was.
That was another thing that I wanted to bring up. She goes, we came from YouTube. Did you guys hear that? We came from YouTube. Tell me in the chats what you think that means. I heard that and I thought, what does she mean we came from YouTube? Are they not YouTube anymore? Is there something else going on here? That there's just like a couple of these slip ups in this video that the reporter in me is like, I would have, if I weren't also basically her, buddy and in a corporate journalism position where I am calling for speech suppression, I would have asked that question. I would have been like, what do you mean you came from YouTube? Aren't you still YouTube? I thought you were still YouTube. What does that mean exactly? But she just literally just said that.
Much more entertainment. It was much more focused on creating interesting things that you saw, funny videos. Music has always been really big on YouTube. And you definitely want to be able to break the latest artists. And so that's something that we need to think about. So when there's a new, we have so many artists who got started on YouTube. So when we have our next, some famous artist like Shawn Mendes or Justin Bieber who got started on YouTube, and they post their video, we want to be able to enable those new artists to break. But if you look at that, breaking artists or discovering the new latest small musician is very different if you're looking for something like cancer information. You don't want to see someone who is just posting information for the first time when you're dealing with cancer. You want to see it from established medical organization. And so
okay, just two quick things. The first that she's discussing, talking about, you don't want to see just some person who's diagnosed with cancer. I don't know, maybe I do want to find somebody who's had a treatment that I could look into. Maybe I do. Maybe I don't just want to hear from the American Medical Association. Okay. And then she talks about, this is really funny. I saw a video a friend of mine shared with me. I can't remember the channel, about the differences in, what is allowable for sensitive content for music videos versus what's allowed if you're doing information or news. So this video was so funny. I wish I could remember it. Maybe you all can think of it and put it in the chat. But basically it's like you can say, F this and whatever. Like you can have shootings and murders and basically like rape and all this stuff in music videos, and YouTube's like promoting the music video. But if you even discuss these topics, firearms, you're talking firearm policy, not even showing firearms, or you're talking about the policy, you are demonetized as a sensitive content. It does not make a whole lot of sense, but it's just to point out the hypocrisy there. And if you know that video, it's freaking hilarious.
What we've done is really fine tune our algorithms to be able to make sure that we are still giving the new creators the ability to be found when it comes to music or humor or something funny, or so many different categories: beauty, crafts, learning, how to, right? All these different areas. But we're dealing with sensitive areas. We really need to take a different approach.
All right, let's move into the governance question of this, since that is a big part of the forum today. Tell me clearly.
The World Economic Forum and governance, very important. Okay, he says that.
There's a lot of conversation in the United States, but elsewhere too. Right? Seen it in Australia. There's a lot of conversation about regulating the big social platforms. You are, I guess, lucky, though maybe unlucky, that you haven't had to be subjected to a 7-hour grilling in front of Congress. But
let's talk about that. Why hasn't Susan been in front of Congress? Okay, I watched this and I said, you know what? That's a really good point, Nick. Okay, I actually hadn't thought about that. I mean, I don't think maybe she is lucky. I'm not sure, but why hasn't YouTube been pulled in front of Congress yet? What's up there?
But congratulations on avoiding that. Tell me one idea that has traction for governing YouTube that you think is a terrible idea, and tell me one idea that has traction that you think is a reasonable idea.
Oh, I mean, look, first of all, I want to say that I understand where governments are certainly coming from, and we see.
Yes, I can understand where governments are coming from. They want to control behavior. I can understand.
Government, we see so many different perspectives across governments, and I'd say generally we're really aligned with the overall approach.
Generally aligned with that approach.
So, we see governments who, of course, we want to keep kids safe. We want to prevent violent extremism on our platform.
What is violent extremism?
And we want to keep our community safe. So
what does that mean?
The laws around whether it's like hate speech or
hate speech. Okay, so we went from violent extremism to hate speech. Let's just be clear, we just made that leap.
Or child safety. Those are all things like we're working incredibly hard to figure out how can we work to
see. That's how they get the people who want to jump on board with this. That's how they do it. They go, violent extremism, and what do you mean by that? Protecting kids. So that it's like, because everybody loves kids. Okay, people love kids. So it's, oh, okay, I get it, Susan. I understand now. You're protecting kids. Instead of like, what do you exactly mean by violent extremism? Like what and hate speech? Like, oh yeah, of course. And then that particular, I think that also shows the side of it. Who clamors to take down hate speech, but it just goes to show her audience that these are the things, and that's sort of the bait and switch, I think, in this. It's like, they use these like big buzzwords, but then rarely ever define what even that means. And she's going to even get into this in a second about how, governments need to really figure out what they mean by hate speech. I mean, all of us sitting here, I'm like, yeah, you need to figure out what you mean by hate speech, Susan.
Do everything we possibly can. I'd say the challenge becomes when we get regulation that's very broad and is not well defined. So something that is harmful, like what is hate? What is harmful?
What is hate? What is harmful? She's saying this is frustrating for them when the government comes out with stuff that's like, we don't want hate speech. We don't want harmful. And she's like, hello, we need to know. Hello, Susan. That's what all of us who have been pushing back on your policies have been saying for like forever, because you don't ever quantify or qualify this. There's so many policies. I've hit every possible community guideline on my channel, and I'm not even controversial. So yes, she gets it. She obviously gets it, but somehow the fuse is not connecting here. I'm not sure.
Those are not things that are easily defined. And, there are many, many different interpretations on that, depending upon what you're handling. And
okay, so she clearly understands this. She clearly understands there's many interpretations. She understands that. So, and she doesn't like it. She's saying she doesn't like it. She's about to tell you that she doesn't like it when she's very scared or concerned, I think is her wording, when governments start, these non-nuanced, just sort of widespread, broad regulations about terms that she doesn't understand. She doesn't like it. What about us? What about the creators that are basically making you a ton of money? Like, what do you think we feel about all this?
And so I'd say the challenges we have when we have overly broad regulation that requires us to potentially remove a lot of content that would not be good in the end for our users. And
okay, she's making the case for why creators on YouTube are so annoyed at this company. She just literally made our case. In fact, I'm going to go back, I'm going to write this down, and maybe I'm going to send her a letter. She's not going to care, but I'm going to write down her exact words, because that's exactly what is so annoying for those of us who are creating content, is that it's so broad. It's not, there's no real way to understand what we're supposed to do. And we feel like we have to self-censor to a ridiculous extent in order to meet the standards of YouTube. So she's annoyed that governments are doing that, but doesn't seem to understand how that's affecting, I don't know, those of us who have been clamoring for a change in these policies on YouTube and less encroachment on speech. She gets it for herself, but maybe not for us.
I also say there's a lot of regulation right now that's happening where people are, we had this issue with what was Article 13, now it's Article 17, the copyright regulation in Europe. And we were able to make a lot of work in terms of progressing it with policymakers, but that was a case where we were really, really concerned if it had gotten too far the way it had been written, that we really would not have been able to enable so many channels on YouTube. So I get really worried about any kind of regulation that causes us to potentially take down large amounts of content that is would hurt so many different creators. Creators are small media companies. They represent a lot of diverse voices. They're storytellers who need to be.
So I just love how every time she's bringing up their creators, the first thing she's talking about media companies. Do you hear that? Like that's now the second time she's referenced that, like that their user group is media companies. And then, yeah, she goes on to be like, oh, I mean, people who need to tell their story, but that's always like the first thing out of her mouth. This should be very telling that, we came from YouTube, like we were that, we're not anymore, basically is what she said, that we're promoting media companies. I'm going to go back to this super chat in case this is something everybody wants to see. Documentary recommendation from Cabin Fever, Century of Self. I agree. It's great, worth watching. So after you decompress from this video, you can go check that out. Okay, here's from her numbers earlier, 16 to 18 views per 10,000 are misinformation as defined by YouTube. That's what is that, greater than 0.2% or less than 2%? Don't they think we can look at 99.8% compared to 0.2% and decide for ourselves? I don't know. Obviously, I'm not a mathematician and I was there. You know what? Let me tell you a quick story about myself in high school and math. All right. Before we continue watching the rest of Susan. So my brother was my middle brother. He was taking college math when he was in middle school, and really, really smart kid. And I also feel like I was kind of smart, a little smart, but I was definitely not the mathematician of the family. And I worked really hard because I had a teacher tell me that, hey, you could, because everybody say you're good at English, you're good at talking, you're good at writing. And so I just kept doing that because I thought, oh, okay, well, I'm good at this. So anyway, but I said, you all may hear my producer on the outside of the office. I think she just got up from her nap. But anyway, if you hear that, that's just her cheering you on and wondering if she can ask Susan a question. But back to my story in high school, I had this teacher say, you know what, you could be good at math. Why don't you just try being good at math? Just, study or work hard or whatever. So I did. I said, I'm going to take a year. I'm going to try to become somebody who is, and I became actually the president of Math Honor Society. And I was president for about a week or so before I was subsequently kicked out of Math Honor Society for talking too much when our teacher was trying to get the unruly students to behave. So I was the first and only president of Math Honor Society to be kicked out for talking, which is then why I decided, I guess I'm just going to go into talking as a profession and screw math. All right, let's continue on with our video, shall we?
Told they're creating a service with educational content, they're deploying jobs, and we just came out with all their GDP and job numbers, which are really impressive. So I worry always when I see regulation that would potentially cause us to hurt a lot of the growth.
She's saying, I get really concerned, nervous when I see regulation that would hurt our growth. She's just making the case for those of us who are like, hello, Susan, what do you think you're doing to us?
We've seen from the internet. And so I'd say we're aligned when it comes to keeping communities safe. We want to do everything we can, and we want the definition of the language to be tight enough that we can actually comply in a way that is clear. And then we also have to just be really careful about the unintended consequences of some of the copyright or, even.
Okay. So yes, once again, she says, we just, we have to remove all this content, and we need things to be clear, and we need to know what the guidelines are. I'm like, hello.
Like Section 230, like what could go wrong that could cause us to have to remove a lot of content that would be really devastating for the internet and for the creative economy.
Do you feel like it would be possible to reform Section 230 in a way that would still give you the ability to filter content, give you protection against the possibility that someone posts something offensive on your platform, but that would solve many of the problems that lawmakers have seen in that very antiquated piece of legislation?
Just in case people are not familiar with Section 230, because I just not going to assume that everybody is beginning with that knowledge, and correct me in the chat, but Section 230 is the Communications Decency Act. Am I right? Communications Decency Act from 96, Clinton era legislation that basically allows these platforms to host content without being liable for that content. So they can allow somebody like me to put this video up, but you have to come sue me, not them. You can't sue them for being, the publisher of that content. Like when I was in mainstream news, you could sue my news organizations for something I put out there, but you can't sue them. Of course, the argument here is that they're editorializing and suppressing speech and whatnot, so they shouldn't be given these protections. There's all kinds of arguments for and against reforming Section 230. I'm not going to get into that right now, but in case you want to look into that more, that is what Section 230 is.
I mean, one of the challenges I have is that there are a lot of lawmakers who want us to remove more content, and then a lot of lawmakers who want us to leave up more content. And so it's not really clear what is it that lawmakers want to solve for in the first place. And
that's a fair point on her part. We have basically split down the aisle at this point. Mostly Democrats want more speech suppression. Amy Klobuchar has been one of the people leading the charge of sending letters to these different tech companies saying, what are you doing? Why aren't you doing more? And they're all getting these now. These letters that are just like, you better shut it down. You're making things worse. And so not shocking that Amy Klobuchar, as well as Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, were on the one of the committees or host groups or something for that award, the Free Expression Award that Susan won. So they're all in it together. But and then Republicans are like, we want more speech, we want more speech, we want more speech, and there doesn't seem to be much compromise, but it is definitely split down the middle. It feels like I don't like to get into the left-right stuff very often because I think it can be a little bit of a smokescreen. And I think more so, the way this should be looked at is a top versus bottom thing, that, an in versus out, those of us that are kind of on the outside of corporate and governance power. But in this particular case, when you're looking at the lawmakers specifically, when you watch those hearings, it's pretty obvious that for the most part, it's Democrats that want more speech suppression and it's Republicans that want less of it. And those of us on the outside, I feel like the journalists or the people who are on the outside boundaries of critical thinking, I guess, like we're asking questions that the mainline narrative, and that crosses over right and left. So I think that there are people on the left and the right who are questioning stuff that are being suppressed and being pushed out of conversations. And I think that should be shared more, that the people who are being censored, not the people who are calling for censorship, but the people who are being censored definitely cross the line when it comes to, that sort of, I think in some cases, false dialectic that we're often fed. Like it's always either left or right. There are people that don't fit that paradigm. There are people that are on both sides that are getting pushed out of the conversation. And I think it's important to just say that here, because we're often, I think, riled up and taught to hate the other side, when I think there's a lot of us that actually have more in common with being pushed out of the conversation, and they would like us to just sort of be looking at it the way they do in Congress, left versus right. I just think that's not not the best way to look at it. So I do make that qualification, but I do think with the lawmakers themselves, you see that specific split.
And that makes it really challenging to be able to address. And so I think there are many ways to be able to address what the objectives are, and we'll certainly work closely with them to try to achieve those objectives. But right now, it's not clear exactly what those objectives are. There seems to be a lot of disagreement about it. So.
Okay, so she's saying we don't really know what the government wants, but hey, if the government can figure it out, we are all on board. All right. So they're showing you their cards there too. We're all on board. Whatever the government wants, let us know.
So until that's clarified, it's hard for us to figure out exactly what are the right next steps. But we'll be having.
And she's not even saying like if they pass a law, which of course, okay, you live in a country, you follow the law, right? She's not even saying that. She's just saying objectives. What are the government objectives? Okay. So it's like, well, wait a second, that, so, so they don't even have to, your elected officials do not even have to go through the legislative process where they approve a law, a regulation for YouTube to do something. They're going to do something if they have an objective. Okay. So they come out with the objective is to get rid of all these kinds of people, and they're gone. They have the objective that only CNN and Fox News and MSNBC should be on your search results or should be on your homepage. Bloomberg, that's what they're going to do. She's basically just saying, like, it doesn't have to be a legislative process, a due process for all of this stuff. It's just an objective. They come up, they make it just so the government gets together and they decide what their objective is. And YouTube's like, sure, we're ready to acquiesce. We just don't know what you want. It's not that we're going to push back on the government. It's just that we just don't know what they want.
I think I would say the next steps are to continue talking about it and continue to try to define that more clearly, and come up with solutions that will keep communities safe, but at the same time will enable the creative economy and the jobs and the education and the huge amount of valuable media to continue to flourish and grow.
And what is an example of legislation that you've seen internationally that you think of as?
This is a really good one too. Your freedom of choice is Coke versus Pepsi. Yeah, exactly. And they own both.
Sensible, balanced, and within the proper scope.
Oh, I mean, I think maybe I'll start with the NetDZ, the first version of it had some really clear language around how we handle hate content and the need to remove that. And that was something that we also agree that we want to remove that type of content. We wound up.
Okay, so hate content is something they're celebrating, the government is pushing, but she just described how that's something that is completely ambiguous and very hard. And I just want to go back to Darnell's super chat. Thank you for the super chat. That government proxy tube First Amendment violation. So, and obviously that's something that is being worked out in court right now. For instance, Bobby Kennedy Jr. has a lawsuit right now. Facebook, I think, because he was booted off of Instagram. And so we'll see, because they're saying basically that the government is pressuring these platforms. And so that it isn't just the platforms that are a private company, they're getting pressured by the government, and that the government is overstepping his bounds. And again, to go back to my point originally of doing this video at all, it's that I just want people to understand that this is happening. This is happening. They're being very open about it. Sometimes, I wonder, especially even with people in my old field of mainstream news, like how aware they are that this is not hard to find. Okay. This video is just out there for everybody to see. So again, like I said, the sort of more skeptical side of me is sitting there thinking, why is she telling me all this? Just a little bit weird, but it's out there, so they're telling us, they're telling us the plan. And so it's there. I just want people to understand that just because, some of the stuff that they're suppressing or whatever, you may not find it on YouTube, but you can find it in other places. So just don't walk around thinking I know everything. And those stupid people, this is what I want to speak specifically to the journalists, especially the mainstream journalists, anyone who's following this channel who still works in mainstream journalism, or, which you probably, if you're watching this channel, you're probably already a skeptic, but, be aware that if you're just reading each other, if you're just living in your echo chamber where all you're doing is you're watching your network affiliate on your little, desk television, or you're just reading the New York Times, you're only getting a certain amount of information, but it doesn't mean that the stuff isn't out there. It is out there. So stop thinking if you're a journalist and you're covering a topic like COVID lockdowns, for instance, or the vaccinations or whatever, that whatever is coming out of the CDC is the only, or what your local health official is saying is the only messaging that's happening out there. But just because it hasn't crossed your desk and it hasn't been amplified by corporate media or by YouTube doesn't mean it's not there. So you got to work hard if you really want to do good journalism. So that's just my PSA for the journalists here. Here we go.
Actually first doing NetDZ and then later expanding our hate policies. And so in many ways, it was useful that we had done a lot of that legwork for NetDZ. So that would be an example of regulation that was useful for us, and we're aligned on that. I think, there's more policy that's coming there, and we are in the process of understanding that and working through that. But the first version was helpful for us. And, we don't want to have hate on our platform. We want to remove it, and we want to remove it quickly. So that was something that was I think we were very aligned, and we were able to work together on.
Okay, so whatever the government decides is hate, YouTube's totally aligned with them, and they're getting rid of it.
Let me ask you a big global question, which is that one of the most discouraging things to me about the world right now is the technological split between East and West, particularly between the United States and China. Do you see any path to rapprochement? Do you see any way that ultimately the United States and China are able to figure out the issues that divide them on tech, and that YouTube actually is operating happily in China some number of years from now?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask about that.
She does not want to answer this question.
Because Google operated in China for a really short time. And so I'm not sure that I'm the right person to answer that question. I just see, what I see about YouTube is just the humanitarian good that we are. So I see.
Okay. This is really telling. And I think this is in alignment with people in corporate news. Okay. They see themselves as humanitarians. Okay. Because Ryan and I kind of went back and forth about this when I was on Ryan Christian again, Last American Vagabond, because he's of the mindset that these people like know they're doing evil. Whereas I actually think they believe they're humanitarians, and they go to sleep at night, I think, with a clear conscience. I think they think that getting rid of stuff is their calling in life. And that includes journalists. So I don't really think they go home conflicted, but I know a lot of people would disagree with me. But anyway, I just bring that up because she basically says, like, first off, I'm not going to answer the question about China. Secondly, I'm going to answer something I do want to answer, which is that we're awesome.
Yes, as a global public video library, and that we have a huge amount of content that people can learn how to do anything, whether it's skill or language or musical instrument. You can research any kind of historical talk. You can see all the WEF talks here on YouTube. You can see all the TED Talks. And so a lot of times I just feel sad if there's a population or a group who can't access that. And there could be many reasons for that. There could be policy reasons, but there also could be technological reasons. People who don't have access, or they're not connected to the internet, or data is very expensive in their countries. So I see.
And remember that these social media platforms, I know we're not talking specifically about YouTube anymore, but these social media platforms have made decisions to, they get mad if like some government shuts them down, if it's not allowing them to push their agenda, or they shut down if they don't want to be pushing an agenda that's being like, something that has to do with protests in another country, or an election in another country, or something like it. Just, they have different policies for different countries and different movements. It's not like they're just, so that's why this humanitarian thing it makes a lot of sense to me, because they don't have a scientific objective way of looking at it. They are looking at it from like, what do they feel like is the good that they want to come out of their actions? What do they want the world to look like? And they're starting from that point, and then they're going from there. They're not starting at the point at which would be, we want to allow all information possible. That would be a different place to start than we see ourselves as humanitarians, and so we need to fit whatever content we allow out there into our humanitarian framework. See, those are very different ways of looking at it. And I do think that that's where the breakdown is with a lot of people when they debate this topic, and that includes people in my old industry. Are you somebody who starts from the point of, freedom? What's the quote again? Anyone who sacrifices freedom for security deserves neither. Ben Franklin. You start from that point, or you start from the point of, listen, there's a lot of dangerous stuff out there, and we have to make sure that we're the humanitarian gatekeepers, and that we're stepping in front of all harmful, injurious things that people could potentially come across. These are just two different ways of looking at the world. As I've said in previous videos, I'm not really quite sure those people come to a compromise. I don't, because there always is going to be a line in the stand that somebody's going to want to draw, and I'm not really sure they're going to meet in the middle anywhere. Just in my experience,
I see the value of being able to offer this library, and so hopefully, in some ways, there will be more bridges built in the future.
Do you have a set of things that, if satisfied, would tell you that it's time to go back into China, or is it so far off in the distance and so out of the question at the moment that you don't even have that punch list?
It's not something I'm working on at all. right now.
I'm not answering.
There's so many other things that I am working on. I have so many areas that I'm focused on our product.
We're trying to get, the Alex Joneses off of YouTube. That's what we're concerned about. Don't you know?
Product, our innovation. We launched Shorts product. I'm very focused on shopping.
Shopping, very important.
Enabling more shopping on YouTube. I'm also
more consumerism on YouTube. Freaking hilarious. Promoting Amazon. All right. Yeah, Alison, if you think there's censorship here, imagine China. To them, YouTube is the Wild West. No, I agree. But, this is the reason why I talk about this, because you think that a lot of people think that, again, to go back to my point, to me, it's like if you are looking at a country where they're actively suppressing speech, that to me, though dangerous, at least you know what you're getting. I want people to understand what they're getting when they go to these platforms. That's it. And for a lot of us that are here right now, we're already there. So it's like not breaking news, but there are still people, many, many, many people who think it's just a conspiracy. It's just a conspiracy that this kind of stuff is happening. It's not a conspiracy. It's out there. They're just not seeing it, or they don't want to see it. And that's why it's like, I think it's more dangerous, the wolf in the sheep's clothing thing. Like, we're humanitarians, we're doing things to help you, when I think we could really argue whether that is in fact the case.
And that responsibility is my number one priority. And as you can see, like, we've made tremendous progress, but there's still a lot more work to do. So I'm very busy just making YouTube a better product.
And I am very interested in seeing the violative content report and seeing whether you can get that number down from 0.15 to 0.17 down to 0.10.
Okay, so the Atlantic guy goes, what I'm really interested in, Susan, is just to see if you could get better at cracking down on free speech. Okay, I know I'm the CEO of a journalistic enterprise, but just want to make sure you understand that I'm really interested in how you're going to get rid of anybody who competes with our ideas, so that we're the only ideas left on planet Earth.
Question, you're in Silicon Valley.
I think we will. I mean, I'll certainly say that's a goal of mine, is that we continue to lower that number.
It's the goal of hers. Okay. She just wants to make sure everybody, I'm just signaling to everybody else in corporate news that we are working on it. Okay. We're going to make sure that you are all that's left standing.
And our team will continue to work on it, and measuring it is always the first goal, being transparent, measuring it. We also break down in our report just, all the different ways, like how it was flagged. Was it flagged by machines? How quickly we took it down? What was the category that was removed for? So I do think that the transparency that we have is a really big step. And what I like about this.
Okay. What I think is interesting about all of this too, is that she's saying we want to have transparency. We want to let people know how we're making these decisions, but I doubt it's because of the people who are mad about it. I actually think it's because there are people who are like, you're not doing enough. So they're trying to appease the mobs that want them to do more. That's what I hear, because frankly, the most powerful people who are coming after YouTube want more suppression, not less. And so it's just interesting to hear the sort of positive spin on that.
Metric a lot is that it encompasses a lot of the questions that regulators had. So a lot of times they would talk about virality. Oh, you had a video, but it got a lot of views really quickly. So all of that is encompassed in the violative video rate, DVR, for people to be able to understand. And all work that we do should bring that number down.
Well, I hope that you bring that number down
I hope you bring it down again.
by becoming better at finding bad videos and not by lowering your standards.
Did you hear that? I hope you do better by finding more bad videos and not lowering your standards. Okay. That's the CEO of the Atlantic saying that right now.
Which would be another way to.
No.
Oh, no. We're not going to lower our standards. Don't worry. We are getting our police force out. We're growing it. We are going to be kicking off bad videos way more often. Don't you worry. But Nick, you guys will not be included in that. Don't worry. Because he's not worried. Does he look like he's worried? No. Because in their mind, they're never going to put out a bad video. Even say they put out false information, which these groups are wont to do. Okay. Again, going back to manufacturing consent, they're not going to get booted. So they're not worried, because no one's going to come after them. They're never going to put out a bad video. Why? Not because it's nothing. That's where you start saying to yourself, it's nothing to do with false information or bad information, or it's a bad video. No, it's just they're in the group. If they go to the cocktail parties, that's how you don't have a bad video. It has nothing to do with the information.
We're raising our standard. I mean, that's the thing to remember, is that we have significantly raised our standard. I mean, just look at 2020. We had 10 different regulations on COVID. We had a number of regulations around civil around civics, election integrity. So we keep raising the bar, and we need to actually make sure that our enforcement is even better while we're raising the bar. And that's a challenge. But we're staff now. We have the people, the policies, the technology in place. So I do see the opportunity for us to really continue to improve that over time.
I'm just saying that as a new CEO, I know that KPIs can influence behavior in funny ways, but I hear what you're saying, and that sounds like exactly, obviously, the right way to do it. Okay, last note, we have about 30 seconds left. Tell me something exciting. Actually, let me ask you this way. Are we going to be watching YouTube more on AR or VR a few years from now?
Do you guys care about this?
Oh.
This is the last question. AR versus
I'd say
VR. Do you
AR.
care?
I'd say AR. I mean, first of all, it's so much potential. And I do think there's a lot of opportunity with AR in terms of modifying video, modifying creation of video, how we view videos. And the challenge, I love VR, but
I don't care about this either, but I also feel like it's what, 40 more seconds. Let's just finish it out. We've been here all day, but let's just make the guy go away. Let's just listen to the last 40 seconds. Maybe there's a nugget there.
It's been hard to get the headsets and the content and get that ecosystem started. And so until there's a real breakthrough where one of them become a lot easier or cheaper, it's going to be hard for VR. But it will happen. There will be that breakthrough, and it will happen. So in the meantime, I think there'll be a lot on AR, and AR can go a long way. I think we're going to see a lot of improvements with video.
I hope she doesn't get flagged for saying AR, because we all know that's a very dangerous firearm. Do you think she's going to get flagged for saying AR multiple times?
Be able to improve our lives and have more tools with AR and have more fun. So I'm optimistic about the future there.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Susan Wojcicki. Let's all leave and go watch some high quality content on YouTube. All right.
All right, let's go watch what's left on YouTube is basically what I meant to say. All right, well, just going to go to a couple more chats and then we're going to wrap it up. This has been a long one. Appreciate everybody sitting through it. Sometimes I just like to show you everything so you can see it for yourself. I did want to go back to, let me see if I can find it. The chats are coming in. Okay, I may just have to, okay, here we go. Mike Bruno, I saw the woman journalist on Steve Bannon. Yeah, so actually I got an email, when was that? Yesterday morning, I believe, that somebody had shared my interview with Sam Bregman, the attorney for the widow of Officer Darian Jarrett, who was killed in that shooting, that guy Omar Cueva, the whole video breakdown I did about his working with Homeland Security investigations and what was really going on there. And the attorney is filing a lawsuit basically saying that he was set up by the federal government to die in this stop. And the whole thing is, it's on my channel, so you can watch it for yourself. I get this email from Bannon's War Room producer asking if I would come on and talk about it. Now, I will be honest with you, not interested. I mean, I am interested, but I'll be honest with you that when I get requests, initially there is a thought in my mind, like, okay, like whose shows will I agree to go on and whose will I not? And I'll be honest with you, I actually don't really have a line there, frankly, because I agree to myself and actually talk to a couple other people that are fellow journalists. Like, say somebody's Bannon, extremely controversial right now, obviously, right? And I have decided that I'm going to basically go on anyone's channel because, I'm always going to tell you what I believe to be the truth, what I found to be true in whatever I'm talking about. I'm going to give you the information as I see it the best I can. But also because I refuse to allow this mob idea of intellectual or the contamination by association that people will tell you can't talk to somebody because they're on the other line. Like, I just reject that. I think that's a way for the establishment, frankly, to keep ideas out of certain worlds. It also doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, even if you are somebody who is one of those people. Oh my God, are you talking to that person? If you're one of those kinds of people, it would make even less sense to me that you wouldn't want to go on someone's show with whom you disagree, because why wouldn't you want your ideas out there for their audience to hear? If you're that concerned about that person, wouldn't you want to go on somebody's show where you're that concerned that you would want other ideas in the interview? Like I guess I would if I was one of those people, but mine is kind of like a big FU to anyone who wants to say you shouldn't talk to this or that kind of person. I absolutely flat out reject that idea, because I think that's made things really bad. I think that's exactly how mainstream media in a lot of cases has divided, especially these 24-hour networks. Like, they have their sort of safe circle in which you can talk to certain kinds of people, but you can't talk to people on the outside of those circles. And that's what makes people in this country, I believe, more divisive and more skeptical of their neighbors. And I'm just not going to do that. So, you know, listen, I've gone into jail cells and spoken with murder, like people who are literally charged with murder. I'm not going to say, you know, they were, that was decided in court of law. But, you know, I will, like, when I was a journalist, I didn't have any, I personally did not have any boundaries. Like, I would take a call from anyone. And if I, you know, I'm sitting there and like, okay, yeah, I mean, let's put your interview. Now, that said, my managers had different ideas. My managers had different ideas about what was an acceptable voice that was allowed in the narrative. And we've talked about that in the past, but I'm not going to kowtow to the idea that, you know, you're guilty by association. I just refuse to do that, because that's, you know, that line gets pushed closer and closer and closer to, you know, places where it's like, wait, that person now you're not allowed to talk to, like that person's not, you know, a lot of people would say, you know, James O'Keefe was rightly booted off of Twitter. I'm sure there are a lot of journalists who'd be like, yeah, he doesn't do journalism, get him off of Twitter. And I'm like, that's so stupid. And they would look at me and say, you talk to that guy, you know, he's a malcontent, he's an agitator. And I'm like, yeah, I would talk to anyone. I really, like, I know a couple of journalists in the independent world now who are of that same mindset. So at least I know I'm not totally alone. That, again, to go back to that original point, if you're somebody who's like, I can't believe you're talking to that person, it makes no sense that you wouldn't do that, or that you know, wouldn't go on their show, because you would want their audience to hear a different viewpoint. But why are we allowing the mob to tell us who we can and cannot talk to? I just refuse that. I will not allow for that. That's not journalism. That is just not journalism. That's not how it works. You talk to everybody and you try to figure out what's going on with the most voices that you could possibly gather. That is journalism, not starting from the viewpoint of, these are all the voices I'm not going to listen to, these are the few that I am, and then I'm going to put together a story based on the few acceptable voices. You listen and talk to everyone and try to figure out what's going on. And that's why, you know what's funny? I used to give my cell phone to everybody I met. I gave my cell phone to grocery store cashiers. I gave my cell phone number to drug dealers. I gave my cell phone to everybody. That's why I had a professional phone and not my personal cell phone doing my reports, which is funny because when I first came to Seattle, the status quo was, if you were a reporter, you use your personal cell phone and the station reimbursed you. And I was like, that is not going to happen with me, because I give my cell phone number to everyone. But it's funny that other journalists would have been okay with that. And that made me kind of wonder, like, are you guys talking to anybody that you would be nervous to have your personal cell phone? Because I'm talking to a lot of people that I would be very nervous that they would know necessarily where I live or have my personal cell phone, but I still want to hear what's going on, because some of the people on the outside that you wouldn't necessarily want, you know, banging on your door when you're alone at night. All right. I'm just saying, like, those are some of the people who know exactly what's going on. And so I talk to everybody. And to go back to that interview, which you can watch if you would like to, I believe it was posted on Rumble. You know what? I'll put it in the link to the description of this video in a second, so you can watch it there. I actually got, you know, I thought Steve Bannon asked fair questions in the interview. I actually did not feel like he was trying to lead me down any particular rabbit hole at all. So, you know, hey, say what you will. Like, I went into that interview not totally sure what was going to happen, but I knew I was going to stick to my guns on what I knew to be, you know, the facts at that point, what we understand to be, you know, knowledge of that case at this point. And I never really felt like I was being misled down any particular path. So I'll just give him the credit on that one. You know, that's been my experience. I talk about, you know, I'm only going to go by what I know and what my experiences are. And I just don't trust, I don't trust the vast majority of you know, those character defamation articles written about any kind of person. I'm always going to try to give somebody the benefit of the doubt to learn about them myself. I'm just going to try to learn about people myself. Okay, let's go to a couple more chats and then we're going to jump off. I do really appreciate everybody sticking with us. Hi, your video, Dr. David Brown, Senior Awareness Found Dangerous, Mr. Vaccines of all kinds are made me thankful for you, baby. Oh, baby, may she be protected for the next eat meat and butter. Yeah. I eat a lot of meat and butter. Okay. Yes, hit a link. Definitely want to see you with Bannon. Okay, I'll put it in the description as soon as I finish this video so you can find it. I'm trying to get to, I saw a couple more come in. How is Mr. Ed? Actually, it's funny you ask about that. Megan, our new horse, is not in good graces right now. She was getting her feet done by the farrier recently, and she flipped out, freaked out, reared up, banged herself against the pole that she was tied up to multiple times, lost her balance, fell over with her head strung up to the pole. Now, I will say I was a little concerned about the fact that she was tied up. I think she's a little bit, she's too flighty at this point, but our farrier is kind of a no nonsense kind of guy. He's like, no, she needs to learn this. She needs to be tied up. So this is like the second or third time now that this horse has ended up on her side. So I am currently seeking some training for her. So if anybody has any ideas in the description or in the comment section, please in the chat, let me know. I would like to understand more about how to take a horse that I will say she's sort of green broke. Like you can ride her, but I don't trust her, if that makes sense. All right. I do not trust her. She's got me a little bit concerned because I don't want to end up with her dead or me dead. Thanks for the super chat, Wordman. I'm trying to go back. Bob, please go on all shows, even Alex Jones or Rachel Maddow or whatever. Be brave and stand your ground. Tell the truth, and you'll always have an audience. Yeah, I would go on Rachel Maddow's. Rachel, hey, we come from the same background. Have me on your show. I will totally do it. You know, it's funny. I remember seeing Katie Halpert say something about, who was it? I think somebody was, going after Glenn Greenwald for going on Tucker Carlson's show. People on the left, journalists were going after them. You can't trust this guy if he goes on Tucker Carlson's show. And Katie Halpert, if you guys know her, she does a podcast with Matt Taibbi, and she's like, the crazy thing is not that. Why did she say that? The crazy thing is not that a journalist would go on, or an anti-war journalist or something, anti-government surveillance journalist would go on Tucker. The weird thing is that they're not getting invited on CNN. And I thought that was a pretty fair statement, or MSNBC. So you got to kind of ask sometimes, like, to me, it shouldn't be something where we like wag our fingers at people for going on a particular show. We should actually be paying more attention to where they're not getting invited and where they're not allowed to speak. I heard back from JP Sears and I heard back from his agent, and his agent sadly said that he is too busy right now for appearances, but that they'll keep me in mind for the future. So the best thing we can do is get this channel to grow past 1 million subscribers, in which case he will have no choice, because then he will need me to get the word out about him. So let's just try to do that. And then maybe we will get JP Sears on the channel. Again, I have been called the female JP Sears by the way I look. I would say I was probably a little bit more of a doppelganger when I had longer hair. I'm not really sure I fit that description anymore, but yes, we can try to do that. Daniel says, Matt Christensen and Blonde in the Belly of the Beast do some great interviews, blogs, and podcasts. I'm sure they love to talk to you, especially since Matt linked me to your site. Actually, I believe Matt is going to be on the channel next week. So stay tuned for that, because I did see his comment on my video about the New Mexico officer, and then I wrote him, and so he has agreed to come on the channel. So we will see him soon. Rachel Maddow has a lot to answer for. I doubt she'd have you, but if she had you, what topics would you speak on? The exact topic of today, suppression of speech. I would like to talk about that. I would like to talk about calls for speech suppression. And then I would also like to talk about just the hysteria of the last 5 years. I would like to understand why they felt like their hysteria was beneficial to the American public. And I would also like to know, I would like go through a list of government officials and ask who she's friends with, and then corporate CEOs. And I would be like, and if she had to answer honestly, which she might not, probably wouldn't. I would be like, okay, I'm going to just do like rapid fire. And you have to say yes or no. Who do you know? And I'd be like, Susan Wojcicki. And she have to say yes or no. Like, who do you have a personal friendship with? And I would just go through the list. I'd like to see that. But you guys, maybe I would just take some questions from you all. Okay. I want to also make sure that I go to my locals page, because I asked people for questions and comments there. So I'm going to look at that real fast. Don't forget, there are links in the description for other platforms. I am officially on ROKFIN now. I am on ROKFIN. I'm on Locals. I'm on ODYSEE. Of course, here on YouTube, Anti-Authoritarianism April, I am demonetizing my content right now. And so I just want to, I'm just going to go through, hang on, I probably could show you this, but okay, we got some comments here. We got some comments. Let's see. Okay, hang on, everybody. I'm going to try to share the screen here. I'm going to try to share the screen and see if I can, hang on. That way I can read it. I hope anyway. It's not going to let me. Okay, forget it. I'm just going to read the comments. Good Lord. This is on my YouTube CEO video we just did. I posted it and said, this is my live stream topic today. Leave me your comments and questions so I can share and answer them. This is on my locals page, which is alisonmorrow.locals.com. Good Lord, who has made up more content than the legacy media? Do they think we're stupid? That's from Susan Ashworth. And then Mr. Silence, do good. More of an observation. It's like when Amazon came in saying brick and mortar was for losers from the antiquated past, re Barnes & Noble. Then Barnes & Noble sells off a vast majority of their brick and mortar. Then Amazon buys those properties and makes Amazon available in brick and mortar as if it's a new thing. These guys were there for the little guy when it benefited the brand to do so. Then the big guys come in and now the little guys are getting in the way. Alison, we need a real alternative. I can build one, but need help. Okay, well, you have to look at that's from Insight of the Ages. Isaac says, I wonder how many content creators actually asked for this, or was it just the White House? Likes and dislikes give real feedback when trying to carve out a channel that creators are wanting people to see. Does YouTube really have a dislike problem for their creators? Is it now that their preferred group is being publicly humiliated and ratioed in their own channels that they'll change the game yet again? And I think that's a really good point because it seems like people who were of the mob mentality did not mind the mob mentality when it was coming after the people they wanted it to come after. But then when it started coming after their people, then they were like, oh no, take away dislikes, take away dislikes. Allison, when will you, this is DMC, when will you be up on ROKFIN? I'm there. Okay, so glad we clarified all that. All right, everybody. Well, it's been great. Let's see. Alison Morrow, I have bad news for you. Unfortunately, your insistence on being rational and reasonable means that your channel will never be commercially successful. Yeah, that's probably true. Oh, well, that's okay. You know what I decided with Anti-Authoritarianism April is that I was going to demonetize my content for the month and see if my small group of supporters would, be a sustainable way of continuing this on and not need to worry about monetization on YouTube. So I think you actually still be successful and do good work with a small group. In fact, I think maybe in some cases it's actually better that way because there's just less, there's less stuff you got to worry about for false floors that could fall out from under you because you have a small group that's all really kind of invested in some of the same things. They're interested in wanting to debate stuff and have diversity of thought and be critical thinkers and all that good stuff. And you know what, who cares if you have 1 million people, then, I would rather have 100% buy-in from 80,000 people than 5% buy-in from 1 million people. That's just the way I look at it now. And I wasn't always that way. When I first got into mainstream news, I used to think the bigger the audience, the better. But now I've realized that actually, small groups can really make a lot of change. And that's why I keep talking about this, because I do think that there's value in having a small group that feels like it can talk with me and talk with each other and, work through some of this stuff. It's just easier to do it sometimes with a smaller channel. I feel a lot more, I don't know. I just feel a lot more, or I hate using the word organic, but that's kind of how it is. It just feels a little more organic to be a smaller group than a bigger one. Okay, I'm going to go now, everybody. I got a kid to take care of and horses that are freaking out. Don't forget to leave me your best horse trainer in the chat comment section. And that way, or would you like to buy my horse? That's my other question. Would you like to buy my horse? Who would like to buy my horse? Let's start it now. $5. So I hear $5. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to sell her. I might. I don't know. I'm debating. If there was like an amazing horse trainer that wanted this horse and it was going to be really good to her, I'd send her to a place where I feel like she would be better off because I'm not the horse whisperer. I don't want to die. I do not want to die. Where's the merchandise? I'm working on it. I need some ideas for how to merch my brand here. I really think the first thing in the work should probably be mason jars since I drink out of one constantly. I'm not really quite sure how to do this. Like, do I get a glass blower involved? Does anybody know anyone? Hey, actually, a really cool thing that happened recently was somebody saw me on Viva and Barnes and is a solar panels seller, and he lives near us actually. And so he was going to help us out with outfitting our Airstream with solar power, which I'm really excited about. Now that will mean that we'll just have to move to somewhere sunnier and warmer. Terrible. Just terrible. The problem is I'm not really sure where we're going to move because it's getting really expensive pretty much everywhere we go. So the horse is, we don't really know what she is. She's a mutt horse. Nobody really knows. She's a mutt. So I could send in, she's a rescue in all sense of the word. And we could send in hair samples and probably find out, but she's small. She's not a pony. She's a full-size horse, but she's small. She could be like, she's almost smaller than an Arabian. She almost looks like, I don't know, like an Arabian and very small quarter horse mix, but very small. She's smaller than Sassy, my Morgan. And she's 10 and she just really hasn't had a lot of training. She just needs somebody to stay on top of her. I want to get a Mustang, but she's not a Mustang. I do want a wild Mustang. I've always wanted, I've always wanted one. She's 10. She's 10. Okay. All right, everybody. I'm going to go. Hey, have a great rest of the day. I will probably see you Monday. I believe if everything goes well, kind of a tease. Monday, hopefully in the morning, I'm going to be doing a live stream with Status Quo, Jordan Sheridan. I don't know if you know him. Let me show you real fast. He's getting suppressed a lot on YouTube. And here, I'm going to show you my screen here. He actually said that this was the best article so far written about him. Hang on. Here. YouTube faces backlash as progressive journalist claims tech giant trying to push us off the platform. Status Quo's Jordan Sheridan says YouTube suppression of independent journalists favors mainstream outlets. So that's kind of what we talked about today. And he and I have been going back and forth. So Jordan says that he will likely be able to come on Monday morning. So hopefully that'll work out. And sorry, I keep saying I'm going to go and then I never go. Yeah, well, Megan could be, I see that No Name asked about her being a jumper. You could teach her to jump. She definitely likes to jump. Okay. She just doesn't jump things when she's told to. She jumps over backwards and falls on her back when we don't want her to jump. But you could probably teach her to jump in the opposite direction, which is forward. And maybe she'd be really good. I don't know. But she definitely needs some training. All right, everybody. See you later.